Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon Ray, founder and voice of Falcons Drip.
Welcome back, everybody, to Falcons Drip Radio. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Kyle. Today, we are going to go over some of the Falcons' superlatives, our predictions for the 2023 season. Before we do that, though, Kyle, we got a little bit of news. Why don't you drop some knowledge on these guys?
Okay, so earlier today we got the announcement that cornerback Breon Borders was signed after getting a tryout with the Falcons. So in a corresponding move, the Falcons cut their DB Jamal Peters to make space for him. And Breon Borders is a well-traveled vet. He's been in the league since 2017 when he went undrafted out of Duke. He went to Statesville High School in Statesville, North Carolina, before ending up bouncing around on practice squads with Oklahoma Raiders, bouncing around, playing a little bit with the Bills, then going on the Houston Texans via offseason / practice squad type stuff, Jaguars, Redskins, Steelers, Dolphins, Titans, Cardinals, then Bears, and now he's with the Falcons. So this is his 11th team he's been on, whether it's via the practice squad or via being there for a stint in the offseason. So he's a well-traveled vet, mostly a special teamer and depth piece, but it's good to have another guy competing in that depth DB room.
Yep, and this won't be the last signing. We're gonna, we know this regime loves to see roster turnover, so we're gonna see guys continuing. So we're gonna see guys continuing to be in and out. People will get hurt. We might bring some guys back. So don't be shocked when we just see some more moves going up to we're all the way through the year. So the superlatives. Where do you want to start? Should we start with the MVP, end with the MVP? What do you
Before we start on superlatives, I found some statistics in some of his NFL games. In his NFL career so far, 42 tackles, 7 pass deflections, an interception, and a fumble recovery. So he's had a little bit of experience playing DB, but he's more of like a backup special teams that I mentioned. So he has a great chance of making this team, if not for all the depth the Falcons have. It might be the position with some of the most depth in this Falcons organization.
Yeah, we're loaded in the DB room. So
Okay, with that, let's get to superlatives, and I'll let you lead that off.
Where did you want to start? Did you want to start with MVP or end with MVP?
Maybe we can end with that.
All right, that sounds good to me. So let's start with our favorite favorite UDFA from 2023. Why don't you start, and I'll say mine.
Okay, so mine is the UTSA safety, Clifford Chapman. If you don't know, this guy is a freak. He's runs a 4.6, is a 6'5", 200-pound safety. So if he's able to put it all together, he could be a beast. His potential is through the roof, but he's got a long way to go. He's very raw, but I love the traits he showed and some of the potential that's possible if he gets everything to go right.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we were just talking about a loaded DB room, but this is a guy who we've talked about before. He could stick around maybe on the practice squad and end up being a big time contributor in a couple of years. So I had to go with, and we've talked about him before also, but I had to go with Justin Marshall being my favorite. Just being a bigger receiver at 6'2", 205. And he had the measure, he had all the numbers too. 4.48, 40-yard dash, 38-inch vertical. He has a reputation for, going up and plucking the football out of the air and making acrobatic catches. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can bring to this team. And I think he actually has a chance to compete and make the roster this year. Will it happen? We'll have to see. There's a lot of guys that could be in the range for a wide receiver 5'6". and then the practice squad guys. So that would be, but he's my favorite signing so far.
I absolutely love that pick. That's a great pick. He's definitely one of those best guys there. As of those undrafted free agents the Falcons signed. But with that, let's move on to our next one, which is the best value for a signing. So by best value, we're meaning like in comparison to how much they're getting paid each million, how much production are you getting? So for best value, I went with Bud Dupree, thinking he's just gonna have a great year. Besides some good guys as a starting player. So I think he's gonna go off. And if I'm not mistaken, he's getting paid like 3 mil.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not
So
sure.
he's a great player for that value. So I absolutely love him at the value and one of my favorite signings by the Falcons this offseason thus far.
Yeah, so Bud Dupree is 2.8 million against the cap this year.
Okay.
So definitely a great signing. A guy who's shown he's got it in the past, and if nothing else, a great rotational player. So for my best value, I had to go with D. Alford. I mean, he's making $873,000 as a guy who was a great slot cornerback last year. He's a guy who's going to come in, compete to be the slot again this year. Will he be the slot? I'm not totally sure. Again, very deep room, but he's a guy who's definitely going to make the roster. He will definitely get snaps, and at a minimum, just matching up against guys. Guys that we feel like are smaller, quicker, because that's the kind of player he is. And when he's in there, he just makes plays. So great value for me at 870,000.
Absolutely love that pick. That's one that's kind of off the board and in a position that has a lot of depth. So definitely a tough position to crack. So we'll see if he's able to not only carve out a role for himself, but stay on
And
this roster.
and even with 870,000, like if he's a rotational guy or he's playing in maybe even not nickel but dime sets where we've got, four corners on the field, like that's great value. I mean, he's a great player. So for me, that I do like, obviously I like yours too, but I think it's expected that Bud Dupree will probably make more of an impact than D. Alford. I think that's the expectation. That's why you pay a guy almost 3 million versus 800,000. But I think per cap hit, right? Per dollar, D.
Mhm.
Alford could surpass everyone on this team and not even be close. So
100%. That's why I think your pick is more of the riskier pick. My pick is
mhm.
kind of like the safer pick where you're like, okay, this guy is good value and should be good value if no injuries or nothing unexpected happens. But your guy's kind of off the board in the fact that he's one of those guys who you could be like, could he miss out on the roster? Could he be worse than expected? So definitely an interesting pick by you. And I'll let you start off the next round. We'll switch up the order a little bit.
There are currently 8 cornerbacks making more money than D. Alford this year that we have on this roster. There's no way he's the ninth best corner we got on here. So pretty, I know. So that's, and all of these numbers, guys, over the cap. If you haven't checked it out before, make sure you do. It's a pretty cool site just to kind of look around and see the cap number and the hits that people are taking. So guys, the next one is called we've declared it the secret contributor, and that's someone who's on the roster right now who people aren't looking at, people aren't expecting to do much, but we think will be a contributor and add value to this team. It's most likely someone who people think will either get cut, be on the practice squad, or be like a guy who's not going to get any reps. Someone who will be probably inactive for the most of the games. And the guy I picked was John Fitzpatrick. You know, John is a 6'7" blocking tight end. There's a legitimate shot for him to not only make the roster, but compete and be the tight end four. Right now, I think on the roster, the tight end four is Felipe Franks. I think that experiment will probably end before the year starts this year, unless they really do value his versatility as a quarterback. And if they move his position back to quarterback and they would also keep John Fitzpatrick as the fourth tight end, like I said, over 6'7", 265 pounds, and he's just a huge target that can block. So that's something that, Arthur Smith values, and there's potential for him to come in and compete with Parker Hesse as a blocking tight end. And, Parker's a shorter guy, more of like a fullback, H-back type move tight end. And he's a guy that, he being John Fitzpatrick, is a guy you can line up in line and he's just going to block and move people. So depending on how his injury, he recovered from his injury last year, depending on how much bulk he's added, depending on, how much, because this is really going to be like his rookie season. So just depending on how all that impacts him, he could be a guy who's a huge contributor to this team.
100%. He's got a similar frame to like a Darnell Washington. He's 6'7". He's a little smaller. He's, instead of being like 280 like Darnell, he's more of like a 250 range, and not as good of an athlete. But overall a solid tight end with, he's a better blocker than he is a pass catcher. So, he'd be a perfect fit for this run game type stuff. Being that guy who's going to do the dirty work, get in there and block. That's why I think he was the perfect pick for the Falcons in the 2022 draft. And he was a great pick for them, even though he was kind of not a great athlete and you knew you weren't going to get a superstar tight end. You knew you were just getting a depth caliber guy who can maybe make himself a bit more valuable if he can get better at catching passes and get better in the pass game.
Is he 240 or 245? Because when he was drafted, I know when he was drafted, they listed him at 262. So I just assumed he was 260. But that could totally be wrong.
I think on the Georgia roster, he was like listed at like 250-ish.
Okay.
I don't know what his exact weight was, but it was definitely a bit smaller than like the Darnell Washington, but the height was very similar.
Oh yeah, he's definitely smaller than Darnell. Yeah, so on the Falcons official website, they have him at 250. So definitely not 265, but bigger than 240. But so we'll just kind of see. Being at 6'7" and 250 pounds is kind of thin. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, for sure. So with that, I'll move on to mine. And mine is a guy who wasn't even a signing this offseason. He was a guy who had to go to minicamp tryouts and then earn his spot. And then the Falcons said, oh, we like this guy, and signed him. And that is linebacker Andre Smith. They signed him after an impressive minicamp tryout. And I think he's got a solid chance of becoming that number 4 linebacker and inside linebacker and being a special teamers and depth piece for this Falcons team. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. But overall, I love what he could bring as a secret contributor.
And we are lacking a lot of depth at linebacker at the moment. He could come in and be our LB4. So definitely a good pick.
Yeah, with that, let's move on to our most improved offensive player. And I put mine in kind of one you might not be thinking about. This is Drake London. He's a guy who had like just below 800 yards. And he's got a chance, if he finds everything he can, to be a receiver with over 1,000 yards and more touchdowns. So overall, I love what he can become in year 2, molding into more of that number 1 receiver as he learns more and as he gains some knowledge from everyone around him.
I feel like with the 3 for offensively, I feel like the big 3 of last year's class, you can't go wrong picking any of them for this. I would say that I think Drake London's going to be a stud. I'm not going to say Desmond Ridder because I think Desmond Ridder, You could put Desmond Ridder for almost any of these, and I'm going to use him for one of my later picks. But so for this pick, the most improved offensive player, I'm going to go with Tyler Algier. And you're sitting there thinking, but Tyler Algier, he had 1,000 yards as a rookie last year. And now Bijan's here. And I don't think that matters. I think, he didn't play for a bunch of the games, and I think Bijan makes him better. Bijan takes some of the load off. Bijan makes it so he's going to be able to play with power and he's not going to get worn down. There's also going to be more competition. If Tyler Algier wants to play, and don't get me wrong, well, obviously don't get me wrong. Hear me now. He's very, very competitive, and he's not just going to roll over and say, yeah, we took a running back at 8, and he's going to take all the passing down work. He's going to take all of the, pass blocking snaps. No. Tyler Algier is not just going to roll over and let that happen. He's going to fight with everything he's got to not come off the field. And he's going to push Bijan. He's going to make Bijan work if Bijan wants to take over as the lead back. And I honestly would not be shocked if Bijan was a third down back this year and Tyler Algier held the reins from him and dominated this year. Talking about over 1,000 yards, maybe over 1,200 yards, depending on what happens. But I'm all in. I'm all in on the Tyler Algier train. I'm buying him low in Dynasty everywhere. So
I get the idea of putting him as most improved for offense. It's just that he had such a great year last year that it's going to be hard to top. I definitely considered thinking about him for the most improved offensive player, but I thought it was just too high of a mark to try to improve on his last season to put him there.
I
And I
think
thought there was other players who could improve a little bit more.
I think what you're going to see with him is he's going to do more this year with less, if that makes any sense. Like he's not going to have as many carries. He's not going to have he's not going to take as many snaps. I think he's going to have more catches out of the backfield, and I think he's going to have more yards per rush. And I would not be shocked if he had more touchdowns either. So we'll just see how it goes. I mean, it's a three-headed backfield for sure between Patterson, Bijan, and Algier, but I'm all in 25. Get the train going, baby. So with that, I just did a lot of talking. Why don't you tell us, Kyle, who's your defensive most improved player?
This was a hard one. It's kind of like there's so many guys you could go with. But I've been thinking about it. I was kind of torn. Was the hardest one for me. But I'm gonna go with a guy you guys not be thinking about. I'm gonna go with Michael Walker. He's a guy who's shown flashes. He's a guy who's shown it at times. And I think he has a lot of ability to improve from what he's been. He obviously hasn't been great. There's been times where he's been good. But he has all the tools to be successful. So I think if he can figure out the mental part of the game, he will get to a lot of improvement this year and be that good starting middle linebacker that the Falcons need.
Yeah, I could definitely see a world where he plays a lot and Troy Anderson maybe takes another year or two to be ready, and Michael Walker's the guy. I think it's a good pick. And even if not, even if he wants to play, similar thing. He's not just going to let Troy Anderson take the job from him for like he did last year. He's going to work to see play time this year. So I had to go, for me, like you said, there's so many different ways to go. I went with Richie Grant, and I feel like the addition of Jesse Bates, the addition of all the other cornerbacks, and the addition of the improved defensive line all help Richie tremendously. We're not going to, where Richie struggled mostly last year was having to cover the deep third, and I think we're going to see him down by the box a lot more frequently because we got Jesse Bates back there. That being said, because of the pressure the defensive line is going to push, they're going to push the pocket. I mean, that's what Ryan Nielsen does. That's the guys we brought in. Quarterbacks are going to have to throw the ball, and Richie Grant's going to be able to make plays. And we're just going to see a lot more of that this year. So I'm excited for Richie.
Yeah, I love that pick. That's kind of that one where you're saying, okay, he's going to be thrown into a better scheme for him. He's going to be schemed better. Um, it's kind of a different line than Michael Walker. Michael Walker is more of him getting himself right. Whereas Richie Grant, it's more of the coaches putting him in positions to get right. So it's two kind of different case scenarios, but I think they're both great possible outcomes for the Falcons.
Yep, can't wait to see what he brings to the table.
Okay, let's get going on offensive rookie of the year, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all mine rookie of the year. And this one I think is pretty easy. It's
Yeah.
Bijan Robinson.
Yeah,
Um,
it doesn't really matter who else does well. But like if you take a running back at number 8 overall, and even though I was so high in Tyler Algier, I also had Bijan. Like you just can't pick anybody else.
You can't pick anyone else for offensive rookie of the year. Bijan's far and away the best offensive rookie we got, considering he's competing for a starting job.
Well, and you could potentially pick Matthew Bergeron, who's also competing for the left guard, and I do think he's going to be very good. But when you're talking about a guy who, and I'm not even going to call him a running back, when you're talking about a guy who's an offensive chess piece versus a left guard, just that's just football, and it's the sexy pick. Like you're going with the offensive chess piece every single time. Bijan has one touchdown. That's going to be infinitely more touchdowns than what Bergeron's going to have this year. So,
100%. So I think it's the obvious pick. While I do think there is a case
what?
for Bergeron, I think Bergeron is a guy who's kind of got to prove it to people. I think Bijan's kind of the known, you're going to get
Yeah.
at least a quality, solid number 2 back at the very worst.
What would Bergeron have to do to surpass Bijan, right? Like, so obviously, before anything else, Tyler Algier has to beat Bijan out. Otherwise, there's no shot, right? Tyler Algier has to beat out Bijan, and Bijan has to be getting just like third down reps or something along those lines. And
I
for
think for
me,
him
like
to
if
beat out some people, I'd say he'd have to like go into preseason, perform well, and maybe get like some pancake blocks, to where you see some
he,
laying dudes out and being more physical, and you just see an overall him beating dudes majority of the time.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be every
he
snap, but
would.
it has to be a lot of the time he's beating out the backups and whoever's in.
Well, so we're just talking about. Are we talking about for the preseason, or are we talking about for the regular season?
I'm talking about like
Right.
preseason. I
So,
would change my pick if he did that in preseason.
gotcha. I'm saying for him just to beat, not just like through the year to beat out Bijan, he has to first of all claim the left guard spot, which is the first thing that has to happen. We have to see this offensive line take a next step, which would be insane because they were already great. He has to give up 0 sacks, probably, right?
Yeah,
He
a
has to give
hundred
up zero
percent.
sacks as a rookie. And I think you're right. I think we got to see some pancake blocks and a high PFF grade. And I
Mm,
think that's doable. But even if he does all of those things, there's still a chance Bijan goes out, has 1,000 yards rushing, has 1,000 yards receiving, has 20. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's still like if Bijan goes off this year, there's nothing that Bergeron can do.
a
But
100%. There's a world where there's no chance Bergeron is the best offensive player the Falcons drafted.
mm,
I think we're both in agreement. Bijan is the guy. So with
yeah,
that, you want to move on to defensive rookie of the year, and I'll let you go first.
that works for me. So I went with Clark Phillips. I think for all of the defensive players, all of the defensive rookies, it's going to be hard for them to see snaps. I think that we've done such a good job of not only improving the starters, we've also done such a great job of taking the bottom of our team and uplifting it, right? So like there's a shot that none of these guys play at all. And I don't think that's true. I think Phillips will eventually, similar to D. Alford, I think he's going to be right in the mix for the nickel job. I think he's going to see some snaps. And I really love his, you know, I love his ball skills. I love his competitiveness. I love his overall mental makeup and his attitude. I think that he's gonna probably be the defensive rookie of the year, but this was a tough call for sure.
100%. There's three guys who you got to think about here. And that's DeMarco Helms, Clark Phillips, who you mentioned, Zach Harrison, who was our third round pick. Zach Harrison is super raw, so I think that's why he shouldn't be it. Clark Phillips, I don't want to repeat your same answer, so I'll make a case for DeMarco Helms. I think it's either Helms or Clark Phillips, and I think Clark Phillips might be the more likely right now, based off how much the Falcons valued him to take him in the fourth round. But DeMarco Helms has all the tools to be that hard-hitting fourth safety, depth piece, special teamer. So I like his chances at being one of the better defensive players the Falcons have drafted this year.
I like him a lot too. He was almost my surprise contributor instead of John Fitzpatrick. So I do like him a lot. Like you said, he special team, definitely gonna be a special teams guy. Could be the fourth safety, could be a guy we see come in and play in the box, maybe in a lot of goal line situations. We could see him playing some safety. So I like that pick.
And with that, let's move on to our offensive player of the year. I think this one was kind of challenging because you have a whole bunch of offensive weapons that you could choose. Algier, Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. I ultimately went with the kind of basic pick, the basically default pick, with Kyle Pitts. He's considered the best player on the team when you're looking at offense. So I think Kyle Pitts is one of the only guys you could go here, unless you wanted to make a case for one of those younger, more unproven guys.
I love the Kyle Pitts pick for offensive player of the year. I actually have Kyle Pitts also on this list, but not there. I have Desmond Ridder as the offensive player of the year. I think Desmond is going to go absolutely crazy this year. And I think that he's going to be slinging it. He's going to command this offense. I think we may not see like some big time throws, but what we're going to see, I mean, we probably will see a couple, but what we're going to see this offense going up and down the field, running the ball, and also him slinging the rock. And all he has to do is get it in our guys' hands, and they're going to do the rest. So with that being said, do you have any comments about Desmond?
So you're going with Desmond? I personally like that pick. It's a unique pick, kind of going off the potential that he has. And he showed out, you put out a stat earlier this offseason where you showed he had a better first 4 games than Matt Ryan did in 2008, which is absolutely crazy considering what Matt Ryan went on to be. And Matt Ryan is widely considered to be a better passer than Ridder might ever be. So it's interesting to see that he's already better than rookie Matt Ryan. So it'll be interesting to see if he can keep the pace of being a better passer than Matt Ryan.
And the point of that stat, because I got some people were like, "Oh yeah, Desmond Ridder's gonna be better than Matt Ryan," and some people were like, "How can you say that? Are you dumb?" And the point isn't to say he's better or worse than Matt Ryan, but the point is like we don't know what we have yet in Desmond Ridder. He has had 4 games in the NFL. I'll tell you this: he's a winner. He's never lost a home game in college or in the NFL, and he's won a hell of a lot of games. I don't know if we can say that on this podcast, but I'm going to do it because it's my podcast. But we can, we can. He's. I don't even know where I was going to go with that. He's won so many games. I think he's up there for some of the most wins in NCAA history. And I believe in Desmond Ridder. I believe in Arthur Smith, and I think this is going to happen. Will he have the numbers that Matt Ryan had? Probably not, but maybe, right? Let's see what happens. Even if he has the numbers that Matt Ryan, did, will he have the same types of throws and the same type of impact passing the ball like Matt Ryan did? Probably not, but maybe. So let's just see what we got, guys. Just jump on the Desmond Ridder train and let's go. Choo choo.
And I also want to point out how Cincinnati just fell, they were worse when he left, and it proved how big his impact was. He was such a great player that they were like 2 or 3 wins worse the next season after he left. So he was such a vital part and such an impactful piece. So it'll be interesting to see if he can become that with the Falcons.
So moving on to MVP, I'm going to use your
Wait, you
offensive.
got to do Defensive Player of the Year.
All right, sorry. So moving on to Defensive Player of the Year, I had to do it. I could not pick anybody else. There's a couple of options you could have gone with, but there was no way I wasn't putting Grady Jarrett here. Like, no way. He's been too good for too long with so little around him, and now we got some help. Grady Jarrett we could see a 10+ sack season for Grady this year. It would not surprise me whatsoever. Like, and I know that's like, oh, like a hot take. I don't think it's that hot. I think it's warm. I think it's a warm take. Now, if I said like 15 or closer to 20, that'd be hot. But I think you could legitimately have double-digit sacks this year, and I don't think it'd be that outlandish.
I don't think it's outlandish at all. I think he's the second best interior, one of the best interior and pass rushers behind Aaron Donald. He might be the second best.
It's probably either him or Chris Jones.
It's very close there. Both guys are great. Chris Jones has had a great career between the Chiefs and the Raiders. And Grady Jarrett has been with the Falcons his whole career, and he's had no help and has been great. So I think if you're looking at overall the guys they've had beside him to help them get to where they are versus their stats, Grady Jarrett's better than Chris Jones. But if you're looking at stats-wise, Chris Jones is probably better than Grady Jarrett at this point for interior pass rushers.
And I would say too, like, when you're down every single game, which Grady has been for the last 4 or 5 years, then you're not going to see a bunch of pass rush snaps. He's not going to be able to get to 10 sacks, especially with nobody else to take any of the double teams. Then where Chris Jones, like, he gets to playing for the Chiefs, he gets to pin his ears back almost every game. So we'll see. I mean, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Chris Jones. My point is that Grady Jarrett can be as good as Chris Jones is. He is as good as Chris Jones is. He might even be better than Chris Jones, and we just don't know it. Chris Jones is a hell of a player. So
100%. With that, I'll move on to my Defensive Player of the Year. And for this, I picked AJ Terrell. I went with one of the deepest rooms in the Falcons, on the Falcons team at cornerback. And you got the leader of that group. You saw what happened when he went down last year. This cornerback room completely fell apart. They lost their best player, and they weren't the same. You had fans yelling that Cornell Armstrong was a bum because of it, because he was a practice squad player to depth piece, playing as a starting corner. That's how important AJ Terrell is. And I think he gets back to what he does best after an injury-riddled year, and becomes that top 5 of the league cornerback.
we saw AJ had a down year last year. 2 years ago, AJ stayed on one side and didn't move and dominated that way. And last year, they said, okay, AJ, like, let's see you moving around a little bit. And, he struggled at times, but so it happened 4 years ago when he just played. He was struggling. Like, things don't just click overnight and you can all of a sudden do it great. He needed to get reps, and let's see what Nielsen decides to do. I'm totally fine with AJ Terrell being a top 5 corner staying on one side. Maybe if he moves around, he's a top 10 corner, or maybe he still is a top 5 corner. We'll have to see what happens. But with you could put, Deion Sanders and Champ Bailey, and if you don't know who those guys are, go look them up. But if you don't know who, if you could put those guys back there, and with the little pass rush that we had, it could make anyone look bad. So I think agreed. Big bounce back year for AJ.
And with that, let's move on to MVP, and I'll let you start this off.
So I already said it. My MVP this year, I think, is gonna be Kyle Pitts. And you mentioned him as your offensive player of the year. Like, we took him at 4 overall for a reason. He's a 6'6", running a 4.4, and that's not in a straight line. Freak. He's a unicorn. He is the best. He's the most talented. I shouldn't say the best. He's the most talented player on this team. Better than London. Not better. More talented than London. More talented than Bijan. He has potential to be such a mismatch. He's so freaking fast. He's so athletic, and everybody's down on him because he had a down year last year with Marcus Mariota throwing the ball. He had by far the most uncatchable passes thrown his way per route. He had by far, and this is after getting hurt halfway through the year, he had by far the most missed yards, most missed yards. I don't remember the exact, what's that stat called again?
I think it's probably just like
air yards.
It's basically the
air
yards that he could have gotten if there was an accurate ball thrown to him.
And it wasn't even close, and that was missing half of the year. Like, he's a stud. He's a freak. He can catch a slant, take it to the house. He can play out wide and against any cornerback. They're too small. Safeties are too small. Linebackers are too slow. Safeties are also too slow. Like, there's nothing you can do against this guy. And all Desmond Ridder has to do is get it to him. That's it. And if he gets half of the balls that Mariota overthrew him on, we're talking about an over 1,000-yard season again. And I think that with the addition of Bergeron and the addition of Jonnu Smith and the addition of Bijan and the addition of inserting Ridder into this, like, it's just going to open things up. And even if Kyle Pitts doesn't have the numbers this year, someone else is going to, because defenses are going to put all their attention on him, and we're just going to dink and dunk down the field. And Drake London's going to eat. Drake London, we could see 2 guys with over 1,000 yards in London and Pitts this year, with 2 running backs with over 1,000 yards. Like, that's how confident I am in this team. And if Kyle Pitts does not have 1,000 yards, it's not because he wasn't great. It's just because we decided to go in another direction because of the amount of attention he was taking. Kyle Pitts for MVP, tight end 1 in the NFL next year, baby. Hot take. Let's go.
I 100% agree, and I don't think I need to add anything else to your great explanation. And I think with that, we should wrap this up and say this team is looking great, and the Falcons should be playoff bound for this upcoming season. And if you're a Falcons fan, you got to be feeling hope for the first time in a while.
So, guys, today we went over the new signing. We talked about some superlatives for next year, some of the players that we like, and we didn't mention them at 12-5 next year, baby. Let's go.
100%. I win 11-6, so I'm a little bit of a Debbie Downer, but that's all right. I still have them as a playoff team and have high hopes for this Falcons team. So with that, I think we'll wrap it up, and I hope all of y'all have a great day and rise up.
Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.